Welcome to Tech Chairs, a new podcast all about sport and technology.
Because technology is the single biggest force shaping modern sport. But how did we get to this point?
So in this first series, we'll try to answer that with the help of innovators and experts from all over the sports that we love so much.
So, whether you're a fan, work in the industry, or are simply tech curious, this is the series for you.
Welcome to Tech Chairs from me, John Inverdale.
And me, Rebecca Hopkins.
Where we talk technology
and sport.
And today we talk about an innovation that's been so successful it's actually almost as universal a word as Hoover.
It's Hawkeye, and one of the men who came up with the concept is Paul Hawkins.
Paul, thank you very much for joining us. Just take us back to those pre-Hawkeye days of John McEnroe saying, "You cannot be serious," and what it was that led you to go down the route that you actually went down.
Cricket was where it all started for me, and the LBW was the controversial part of cricket, which we felt we could resolve. Channel 4 had just taken over the television production from the BBC. They'd already bought in the snickometer, and I'm a relatively ideasy guy, just finished university. And rather than getting a proper job, I thought I'd see whether there was an appetite for taking cricket broadcast to the next level. And there was always the hope to get into many different sports, but whether it'd ever be used efficiently for the game and how far it'd go, you just never know. And I do genuinely believe sport's a metaphor for life, and it was exactly the same, in the same way as any sports person starting out in their career and never knowing whether they'll be number one in the world or a professional or just enjoy the sport. Hawkeye started out very much the same, just one step at a time and see where it took us.
I'm fascinated because we come across so many young people leading startups, and they always say, look, yeah, it can be a struggle to be taken seriously. How and who did you persuade to take a chance on Hawkeye in the first instance?
A lot of these stories of young entrepreneurs, that luck plays a big part. And I suppose I was the bridge that I could talk the cricket language of having played, and the PhD in artificial intelligence were so vaguely knew enough technically to have some idea of what was going on. So I could speak both languages to a certain extent. And it was Test Match Special, actually, which gave us probably the lucky break, that we were in a situation. I was working for a development company who could have the expertise to do it, and the Channel 4s and the Skies were reluctant to invest in having it developed. And ironically, Jonathan Agnew, who's never been a massive fan of Hawkeye, but he kind of gave us a break. We went up to Trent Bridge and did a little interview with him during the lunchtime break after there was a couple of controversial umpiring decisions in the game. And it rained during the lunchtime interview. And so they had an hour to fill. I was probably on Test Match Special for the best part of an hour. And it was that publicity that was really the change that then Channel 4 and Sky realised that there's a lot of publicity in the papers the following days because they couldn't write about the cricket. And they knew if one of them didn't, then the other one would. So we went from having no possible customers to two and choosing between them. So that was the catalyst for getting the money to invest in the technology to start with, and then got rolled out in 2001, in the ashes of 2001, which again was very lucky because our product was pretty basic at that stage, but we had Glenn McGrath and Shane Warne bowling, which were just great Hawkeye stories in terms of how much they're turning it, where they're pitching it and everything like that, and it all started there.
It is amazing to think, actually, that we're talking about this century still, because it's so part of the sporting landscape now. It is still relatively new. You mentioned technology. Without being too technical, just explain, you're lying in bed, you're thinking there has to be a way where we can technically prove whether the ball was going to hit the stumps or whether the serve was out or whatever. How do you do that?
So we've taken the approach of using cameras for pretty much all of our tracking, and other people have tried chips in balls and things like that. But I think the unique selling point to a certain extent of Hawkeye is to try and be really practical with our engineering approaches, and just things are so much easier if you don't need to interfere with the field of play, and so having cameras around the stadium of whichever sport and being really flexible in terms of where cameras can go to fit into different kind of infrastructures. And if you need to put a camera in the Royal Box at Wimbledon, you're not going to get one. So having an architecture which can be really flexible to different kind of situations and deal with the practical challenges of different sports. A cricket match, you want to calibrate the cameras, but if it's been raining the days before and the covers are on until 15 minutes before play start, you need to better deal with those kind of issues. So at the very basic level, we find balls or people or whatever in a multitude of cameras, and then combine the information from each camera together to work out where is it in 3D. But I'd say there's more cleverness in dealing with all the practical side of things than there is just the core tracking and side of it.
And Paul, you've not just evolved in one sport, you've kind of done so many. Is the motivation commercial or love of sport? Or at what point do you sit back and think, oh, nothing's happening in rugby, I should do something there? Or does it just come to you more as a road to Damascus moment?
It's very much a dialogue with the governing bodies in terms of, again, that practical side of things is what's good for the sport. And it's not then just about the technology, but how it's used. So VAR, for example, which has still had a little bit of a rocky road into the game. But we had 2 years with the Dutch FA behind the scenes of kind of thinking about what decisions could it be used for, how quick could we make the decisions, and all those kind of things. So by having, I suppose, the trust of a lot of governing bodies, and then can enter into dialogue with them to try and get the balance right between making officiating not the story of the game, which is ultimately the end game, and to do that as quickly and without affecting the fabric of the game as much as possible. So whether you introduce it with a challenge system, whether you do it so it's immediate. Tennis is obviously just going through a change now of having been a challenge system for a number of years to now Hawkeye Live, so where we immediately call the lines and there are no line judges. So it's a dialogue for the governing bodies to understand what's technically possible, and then for us to work with them to mould it into the game in the way that best suits the overall objective of that game.
And you mentioned that, actually, watching the Australian Open tennis this year, where now line judges are obsolete and technology is king. When you watch that, do you think, God, we've come a long way in 20 years? Does it make you immensely proud to see the way that a sport has so readily engaged with that?
It does and it doesn't. I suppose a bit like, again, metaphor of a sports person, what it actually makes you is quite humble in terms of understanding your responsibility for the game. Because now, if the technology fails, then the whole game has to stop and all the rest of it. So, with the responsibility comes, we take it pretty seriously. So that side of things plays on your mind. And I suppose a bit like a sports person, you're always thinking about the next Grand Slam rather than spending that much time reflecting on what you've already achieved. So, reputation takes an awfully long time to build up and a very short amount of time to lose. So I think if you spend too much time reflecting on what you've achieved, you run the danger of becoming complacent. So, the Hawkeye Live is undoubtedly, technologically quite clever in terms of being able to do it that reliably on that number of courts and that quickly. But with that then becomes the responsibility to the game.
And with the technology, when you develop it, and you've said often it's a partnership, do you ever get frustrated with the compromises you're being asked to make? Or do you ever look at how something is being implemented and think, oh, I wish they'd do it this way, it would have been so much better?
Nowadays, not so much, because I think it is that much more established. Through the journey, there have been many frustrations, and football was probably one of the biggest ones. And, if it wasn't for the Frank Lampard goal of 2010, but before then, IFAB and FIFA had been very against bringing in technology into the game, whereas the Premier League were very much calling for it and wanting it. And the tipping point is in a number of sports has been a reaction to a highly controversial moment. That's when they said, well, we've got to have this because of that. And you kind of think, well, you knew that was going to happen at some point, so why couldn't you have been proactive rather than reactive and prevent it happening in the first instance?
Okay, that's interesting. And equally, is there anything that happens in sport where you think, I really wish we could come up with something that solves that specific problem?
For me, the golden nugget of sport is pressure. And the generic story of so many sports is how the top athletes can deal with pressure. And it's the same whether you're serving for the Grand Slam final, about to take the kick to win the Rugby World Cup or whatever. And that's why sport is so engaging. And the thing that I would love to do is be able to tell that story of pressure, because I think for the non-sporting enthusiast, that's why we as sports fans love it so much, I think, is that we can relate to what that feels like and put ourselves in the shoes and we get engaged in it and we can feel it. So telling that story of pressure, and we've kind of played around with heart rates and blood pressures and things like that, but it doesn't actually really tell the story. So for me, that's the thing that I'd love technology to get across to the viewer in the way that it doesn't currently.
So some Hawkeye chip in the brain is just the next stage. Listen, one last question, Paul. And what's in a name? Your name happens to be Hawkins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the device happens to be Hawkeye. I don't know if that was, by chance, because it's such a great name and it does what it says. So in a sense, was that luck? Who came up with the name?
I came up with the name, and it completely like it was kind of double entendre. When I initially pitched the idea internally to my research I was working for, and I literally just started, I was a graduate engineer. And so if nothing else came out of it, I wanted a way to get my name known, within the book. So and rather than calling it some acronym for something quite techie, I wanted to bring it to life and do that side of things. So yes, it kind of works and it's stuck, and we still know it now. In America, it's less well known as Hawkeye actually, and we do a lot of American sports. So it's nice that where I come from, it is pretty household name.
So, Paul, before we go, we are collecting sporting moments that are in contention for the greatest technology moment in sport ever. We're calling it, But Is It a Goat? Have you got a goat for us?
Well, so I gave this some thought, and the goat for me, you need to actually take a little bit of a step back and think, what our type of technology is doing. And at the end of the day, we're helping the right person win a game. But for anyone that then wins a sporting event because of Hawkeye, someone else has lost. And therefore it is a zero-sum game. So I think try to think outside of my narrow sphere of what we contribute towards technology. And the Halo technology in Formula One, which has literally saved lives of how, there've been many accidents in Formula One over the years and other motorsports where people have died through wheels hitting them, and now in more recent years where that hasn't happened. Well, that kind of technology isn't a zero-sum game, and it changes the sport to a far more important kind of way than deciding who's won or lost. So it literally saves lives. So Halo and other kinds of Formula One technology that then made its way into everyday motors, but the cars that we drive, that also save lives. I think we've got to put tip our hat and say that technology is far more important to the world than what we do.
Oh, Paul. Well, we like that. Ash, our producer's nodding his head as well. So Ash likes it. And then we just have to throw it over to our listeners. So, guys, is it a goat?
Well, Paul, that was great. Thank you so much. You will enjoy, I'm sure, the next edition of Tech Chairs because we're moving into the world of what athletes wear, which really has changed out of all recognition in the past couple of decades.
Oh, we look forward to your company next time. Please do nominate your greatest technology in sports moments or any invention by contacting us at techchairs@Sports Technology Group or tweet us at Sport Tech Group using the hashtag SportsTechGoat and TechChairs.
And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of Tech Chairs. We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, entertaining.
If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay up to date with all things sport tech, be sure to subscribe. You can follow us on Apple, Spotify, and all good podcast channels.
And if you have any feedback, suggestions, or just want to say hello, contact us on Twitter @SportTechGroup, LinkedIn, the STA Group, or by email techchairs@sportstechgroup.org.
Don't forget, if you're posting on social, our hashtags are TechChairs and SportsTechGoat.